Good evening, and thank you for joining us for our seventh installment of our Unmasked series. My name is Afeni Grace. I am the program coordinator for the Harvey B. Gantt Center. Tonight, we tackle the inflamed impact of food deserts during this climate. We've included community leaders to discuss their experience of the effects of food deserts. We hear from a Charlotte historian to incorporate the historical and structural sources of food deserts. And we also hear from people on the front lines, working to provide healthy and affordable options to neighborhoods, especially those disadvantaged during this pandemic. Before we dive in, please be sure to click that subscribe button below the screen to be updated on all future Gantt Center programs and visit our website, ganttcenter.org, for all things Gantt Center related. As with our previous conversations, we do have a 2-minute audience survey linked in our YouTube chat. If you haven't had the chance to complete the survey, please do so now. We love to see such great audience engagement, so please be sure to use that YouTube chat for any questions or comments that you have throughout the evening. We will discuss the survey results and audience questions in the second half of the program. We are very excited to welcome back Q City Metro's founder and publisher, Glenn Burkins, to facilitate tonight's conversation. In addition to being an editor and a journalist, Glenn launched Q City Metro as a way to keep Charlotte's Black community informed about issues that shaped our lives, everything from government to health and entertainment. Thank you so much for joining us again, Glenn, and welcome back.
Thank you, Afeni, as always. Few things are more basic to human life than food. Yet in this richest nation on earth, millions of families struggle to obtain an adequate supply of fresh, affordable meats, vegetables, and fruits. For many, it's a matter of simple economics. For others, geography plays a role. They live in poor communities without full-service grocery stores, relegated to shop at corner stores where canned and processed foods prevail. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration calls these places food deserts. And here in Mecklenburg County, about 15% of residents fall into that category. Most are Black and brown. And they live in an area that has come to be known as the Crescent. Just today, the Mecklenburg Board of County Commissioners approved by straw vote an amendment that would allocate $3 million to address food insecurity in the Crescent. The amendment to the county manager's budget was put forth by Commissioner Trevor Fuller. Today, we'll discuss various aspects of food insecurity in Mecklenburg, how we got here, why we should care, and what's being done to address this problem. We're joined today by a group of individuals, all working in various ways to find solutions. We're joined today by Raechelle Petteway. Raechelle is Regional Community Relations Specialist with Food Lion. Raechelle, welcome to the program. We also have Debbie Williams, Executive Director of the Brook Hill Community Resource Center. Debbie, welcome.
Hi, nice to be here this evening.
And we have North Carolina historian Tom Hanchett with us today. Tom, welcome to the show.
Good to see you.
And finally, Reggie.
Oh, that's me. I can see me. Look at me. There's Glenn. Hey, Glenn.
How are you, Tom? And finally, we have Reggie Singleton. Reggie is founder and executive director of the Mel's Place here in Charlotte. Welcome, Reggie.
Greetings and thank you, Brother Glenn.
Absolutely. Let's start with Tom. In my introduction, I briefly laid out kind of what the problem is with food deserts. But how we got here was no accident, and it did not happen overnight. Bring us up to speed, if you will, on how we ended up in this particular situation.
Well, I've done a lot of research on, frankly, how Charlotte got segregated. In fact, I've got a book out about that. It's not just a government thing or just a private enterprise thing. It's a whole layering of decisions for the last century. And some of the things that are are things that are still going on that have given this two Charlottes, the wedge of wealth in the southeast, and the crescent of not wealth across the center of the county.
So talk just a little bit more about that history, if you will. Earlier this week, you and I talked, and you talked about decisions that were made that actually led to this layering, this segregation, if you will. Can you talk just a little bit more about that?
We got a couple of slides, I think. If we could bring up whatever the first slide is, I'll talk a little bit about that. Like I say, there are a whole series of decisions that have gotten us to this crescent and wedge, and that's the map that you see there. But here are a couple of those decisions. You might have heard of something called redlining, which is now illegal. But back in the 1930s, in the middle of the Great Depression, the federal government did redlining. What it was credit mapping. And what happened was that with the Depression, as we saw in 2008 as well, banks got really skittish about making loans. And so they sent folks out to talk with real estate leaders and map where the good credit risk is. And what you see on the left is a map from 1938. It's not aligned north-south, so it's a little bit hard to read. But down in the lower right-hand corner, you can see some green and blue patches. And those are, frankly, the wealthiest and whitest neighborhoods in Charlotte. Dilworth, Myers Park, Eastover, the Elizabeth neighborhood, parts of Plaza Midwood and Country Club Acres over on the east. And so the idea was to pick out good credit risk neighborhoods so that bankers would lose their jitters and they would start making loans again. But the folks that made the maps were well-to-do white folks with the biases that they brought with them. And so areas that were African-American, if you go over to the left of the map, there's a big patch of red. That's where Johnson C. Smith University was. And if you, you can see that the west side of the city is not given a good credit rating. And that is really painful. If you know the Johnson C. Smith neighborhood story there around Biddleville was where the professors lived. There were folks with wealth, good jobs, tremendous education. And here's the federal government saying, enhancing disinvestment. So that's what you see on the left. On the right is Charlotte's very first zoning map in 1947. And there, the green is single family zoning. And again, you can see that it's almost all in Southeast Charlotte, the lower right-hand corner of the map. And those are the areas that are demarcated by this local policy of zoning. If you look right at the middle of the map, there's a red piece that goes north-south. That's a business zone, that's Tryon Street. But immediately to the right of it, there is a yellow patch, and that is the old Brooklyn neighborhood. The Brooklyn neighborhood was a mixed income neighborhood, a lot of Black homeowners, most Black institutions were there. And it is yellow because it is zoned, quote unquote, industrial, which basically meant anything goes. And so here again, you have disinvestment encouraged in African-American neighborhoods, and white neighborhoods singled out for all the good things in life. So flip to the next slide. And we're back to the crescent and wedge. And you can see that the wedge pretty much follows those earlier maps.
Tom, one of the interesting things is that even as we're talking about food deserts in part of Mecklenburg County, we actually have a grocery war going on in some parts of the city.
Yes, if you go down to one particular part of town, there is a Harris Teeter that's been there for a long time, big fancy Harris Teeter. Right across the street, there's a new Publix. And guess where that is? Well, it's down in the wedge. Another part of town, Statesville Avenue, they cannot get a grocery store in there for love or money, and they've been trying it. Guess where that is? It's in the Crescent. And so decisions made long ago, we can break those decisions, we can change those decisions, but if we just assume that the market's going to take care of it, it ain't.
So is this a matter of race? Is this a matter of economics? Why are some areas rich with grocery stores and others without?
Well, I'm not a person who cites grocery stores for a living, and I would love actually to sit down with such a person. But I think they often think they're being objective. The statistics show that there are more people of wealth along in Cotswold area than there are along Statesville Road. I'm a hard-headed business person. I want to locate my stores where there are a lot of people with money jingling in their pockets. And if you only take that, objective reality into account, you end up reinforcing and making worse things rather than changing the game.
Debbie, you're executive director of the Brook Hill Community Resource Center. How is your organization involved in this struggle?
Well, as you know, excuse me, Brookhill has finally, the gentrification bug has finally caught up with Brookhill. The Brookhill community has been scheduled for redevelopment. So we decided the Brookhill Community Center came about because Pastor Ray McKinnon and myself sat down and we talked about how can we help the current residents transition into whatever is coming. So we decided, hey, can we bring in resources? Can we create a common space that the residents can come in and we can assist them in with whatever means that they need. We have volunteers that come in to do financial education, resume building, job search skills, whatever the community may need. So, and then we have partnerships with other different organizations. So we try to bring in the resources that they may not otherwise know about or have transportation to get to certain or other organizations. We try to bring that to the community.
As development has closed in around Brook Hill, is it considered now a food desert?
It still is a food desert. It always has been a food desert. I grew up here. Well, since South End has now expanded, the Publix and the Harris Teeter, it's in walking distance, about 15 minutes from the community. But there again, you have elderly people that cannot make that walk to South Boulevard, 15 minutes up the street to get fresh vegetables to do the grocery shopping. So yes, there's still a food desert here in the community.
Okay, Raechelle, Food Lion has a program where it has been involved in trying to address food insecurity in certain parts of our community. Can you tell us just a little bit about that?
Sure. So in 2014, Food Lion launched Food Lion Feeds, which is our company's philanthropic hunger relief platform. So Food Lion Feeds exists because it is a demonstration to our local communities of our commitment to ending hunger. And so with that, it just makes sense for us as a business. We are a grocery store, we're food people, we sell groceries. So that's part of the reason why we are so very passionate about hunger relief and ensuring that the difficult choices that people have to make day to day in our communities around, whether to purchase gas or buy groceries, or seniors deciding between purchasing necessary medications or, buying their meal for the evening. We feel that those choices shouldn't have to be made by anyone. And so through the work of Food Lion Feeds, we initially started out to provide 500 million meals to local communities to support hunger relief efforts. And we met that goal last year, 18 months early. And that was done through the help of our customers and our associates across our 10-state footprint, and the tremendous work that we've invested in community partners such as Second Harvest Food Bank of Metrolina here in Charlotte, and other local pantries across our footprint.
How many meals?
500 million meals, and that was met 18 months early last year. And as a result of that, we recommitted and reconfirmed our commitment to hunger relief in local communities by pledging to donate 1 billion more meals by the year 2025.
Okay. And Reggie, you're founder and executive director of the Mel's Place. I would describe it as a mentoring program for young men. How would you describe a Mel's Place or the Mel's Place, and how did you get involved in the food insecurity?
Thank you, Brother Glenn, in respect to the ancestors. The Mel's Place is a time-honored manhood training program for Black boys 12 to 18. And so while mentorship is our wheelhouse, we've learned very early around 2009 that part of manhood needs to be around addressing fundamental issues that are in our community. And so we use a number of practices. We use sustainable, regenerative ways to not only teach African-American males to move beyond mere, just benevolent food being given away to more self-sufficient kinds of practices. And so we're educating our young men to reclaim a long history, storied history and past, that we should be fundamental players in the food system and move beyond, again, mere consumption. And so we teach them, again, sustainability, regenerative farming and agriculture, and we do a significant amount of distribution with the food that we produce. And we're having incredible success with some of our partners, the Rosa Parks Farmers Market, and of course the LOC and Public Health and Mecklenburg County. We have a number of partners, the Brewington Farms, who work with us to, again, educate our young men about the value of growing your own food and why it's necessary that we grow our own food and why it's necessary that we should profit from our food. So sustainability, self-reliance are core issues with our agricultural program.
So the Mel's Place has a community garden where you grow fresh fruits and vegetables, and you distribute them to people in the community, correct?
Yes, sir.
And I believe you just did a distribution maybe a week or so ago.
That's right. Thank you. And in fact, we thought it was so important when we see the various sources of food banks and other distribution sites, and we were concerned. Some of the farmers were greatly concerned that the amount of highly starch and highly synthetic and processed food that was being distributed. And we think it's important that many of these very vulnerable populations that we all are concerned about, that they have other options that are locally grown, seasonally, and culturally appropriate. So community service is a fundamental part of what we do. Again, mentorship is our wheelhouse. Agriculture is a huge program for us, but community service is fundamental. These young men learn early, and we teach the community that it's been said, medicine is food and food is medicine. And when we look at the rates of African Americans that not only have been affected, but have died, we think that eating, clean, locally, seasonal, culturally appropriate food to boost their immune systems could potentially thwart some of the rates of deaths that we're dealing with COVID. And so distribution and service is fundamental, and we want to be a beacon of hope and inspiration for people. And so to be able to see these young Black men serving the seniors, and particularly along the Beatties Ford Road corridor, of which they call a food desert. But as much as they may be a food desert, there's also job deserts there. There is healthcare deserts. There is educational deserts. And it just didn't start with COVID, but we're seeing it magnified right now And so we think it's important that our people be very, very much engaged in the full food system and not just mere consumers. We want to be producers, processors, distributors. We want to have chefs, and there's some policies and things that we could do to help ensure that organizations like mine and some of the others who are ready to go and just merely need the resources, that those things are in place.
I want to throw this question open, throw this question out to the group. COVID-19 has, as much as anything, put in stark relief the disparities that we have in America. Racial disparities, economic disparities. How does food and nutrition play a role in that? We know that, as you said, Reggie, food is medicine and medicine is food. Food plays a vital role in our overall well-being. It's not just a convenience. Could someone on our panel talk about that a little?
Well, I'll just share a personal eye-opener for me. I help a community building initiative here in Charlotte lead tours about race and social justice. And we do different tours depending on what folks want to see. And right before the lockdown, a group asked to be introduced to the homeless situation in Charlotte. Not just things like urban ministries and crisis assistance, but also the tent camps, which at that point you had to kind of look closely to see. But we also stopped at urban ministries, which does an amazing job of feeding people who are experiencing homelessness. And I walked in there and I was struck on one hand by the love and the community. I felt very welcome there, but also I was about the only white person. And I had just come from a talk about the historical roots that have caused more African Americans to deal with homelessness. And it just really hit me that as you look at the people who need food today, there are folks who are being hurt by this structural racism. All right, well, that was on like what, Thursday or Friday? And then on, I guess it was Friday, the lockdown came. And I just couldn't do anything but think about, who are the people that are crammed together, trying to get food, and now they're supposed to be distant somehow? That's not going to work. And it shouldn't have been as big a surprise, but I'll tell you, it just hit me emotionally.
Debbie, what does food insecurity look like in your community?
Well, especially during the pandemic, we do a weekly Thursday lunch for the community. So when this happened, the South Tryon Community Church, we actually started doing it every day. So now we feed 5 days a week, every day, to make sure that the kids, not only the kids, but the community have food to eat. We have talked about, I actually talked with, I met Mr. Brewington at the farmer's market on Saturday. Paul Brewington, I think Mr. Reggie, you had mentioned him. We're in conversation with him to see if we're trying to bring a monthly farmer's market to the community, maybe one Saturday a month, to bring some fresh vegetables and some fresh product to the produce to the community. So yes, we're doing all we can here in our community. We give out, the church itself gives out food to whomever stops by. We've always been a community church, and now that the community center's here as well. So yeah, we do whatever we can for not only our community, but whomever's in need, and if we can assist, that's what we do. There is a great need. And now that the kids are out of school every day and they're not getting that lunch, I have free breakfast and free lunch. It's a community duty. It's just our duty to make sure that those children and the adults as well are fed at least one good meal a day.
Reggie, you personally have been involved in the food production business for a long time, even as a child. You and I have talked about it in the past. Share just a little of your story with the audience.
Thank you, brother. In fact, I was involved in the food system work as early as the age of 5. I was doing seasonal, as well as other teenagers in the Sea Islands and the Charleston area, doing seasonal migrant work during the summer. And this was picking cucumbers and tomatoes. And we saw the exploitation of laborers and farm workers. And after graduating, my first job was with the Department of Corrections in Columbia. And I saw the exploitation of prison labor there. And so where they had inmates that would be growing and working at these farms in Lexington and Columbia. And so I had an appreciation very early for it. And so when we were formulating and helping the Mills Place to evolve, we knew that we needed to go beyond just mere even growing gardens. I'm not sure that just growing gardens and growing in containers in farmers markets and grocery stores is the answer. I think fundamentally sovereignty is the answer. And this is where, again, where people feel that they have a stake in the food system to not only address the myriad of chronic diseases that we needlessly suffer from, but also the jobs, the employability that agriculture brings. So you're talking about an area where, as recent as the 1900s, where we had almost 1 million farmers, and today there's only about 16,000. What we try to do at the Mills Place is to encourage young men to go into the STEMs and go into the sciences and try to encourage funders and foundations and public health facilities to invest directly into programs that are grassroots programs like the Mills Place and others to give directly so that we can grow more farmers, address some of these high unemployability rates that still exist. So the farm and the food system was introduced to me very, very early. If I could share one other story, our group have a travel program too. We travel around the country regionally, as well as international. They've had a chance to study the works of sustainability in Cuba. We visited Alamar, which is an outstanding example of sustainability. We also visited the country of Ghana, the country of Ghana twice on the continent of Africa. And they were able to see the inequalities. For instance, Ghana was the world's largest or second largest producer in cocoa beans, and Cote d'Ivoire was the #1 in terms of cocoa production, yet neither one of those countries were in the processing of the cocoa or to create chocolate. So you had Hershey's, Nestle's, Canterbury's. Those companies were profiting big time and really wanted to keep those nations in the raw production aspect of it in a buyer's market as opposed to a seller's market, and continuing to relegate those countries, and not controlling their destiny. We really try to encourage our young men to think bigger, to think systems, to think food chain. And we're having a lot of success, and we're excited about some of the partnerships that we've been able to forge to ensure that that great things are coming down the pike, so that when the next virus comes down the pike, we would not be in this hapless, hopeless position where we're looking for charitable food or again, some foundation to give us nickels when we really are in need of transformative monies and funding.
I want to spend a little time talking about resources. Tom, Debbie, Raechelle, what resources are available for people who might be suffering from hunger, food insecurity? Tom, you want to take that?
Yeah, just a second, if I may. I've had a person ask a question. I think I was supposed to deal with this and I didn't do it. But what is the definition of food desert? I've got the USDA.gov website up, the US Department of Agriculture, and they talk about it being a low income census tract where a significant number, at least 500 people, are greater than a half mile from the nearest supermarket. And half a mile, well, what's that? Well, Jebby Williams was talking about folks walking from Brook Hill to the new Publix, which is a 15-minute walk. That's 0.8 miles. I looked it up on Google. So that means if you're walking there and walking back, you're walking a half hour. You're walking a mile and a half. And if you got a car, what's the problem? But low income folks, a lot of them don't have a car. And so when we're talking about food deserts, it means something different, to me, to be 10 minutes from a Food Lion or whatever, than it does for somebody at Brook Hill. So let me just put that in the room, that when we're talking about food deserts, that's the USDA definition.
Okay. Resources. Debbie, Raechelle, Food Lion works with a number of food partners in I think you said 10-state region.
Yeah.
Who are some of these partners locally?
So we work with over 31 food banks across our 10-state footprint. And these are regional food banks such as Second Harvest Food Bank of Metro Atlanta. But we also are doing a lot of work at the grassroots level with some local organizations such as Renaissance West Community Initiative here in Charlotte, and the Bulb as well. Because what we've come to understand as our work has evolved since Food Lion Feeds began in 2014 is, it's not just about feeding people and meeting a need today, but it's really about looking at the root causes of hunger. And so we know that when we do that, one of the things that comes up is lack of access and transportation, in which we just spoke about. And so as a resource, we're working with our community partners to set up mobile programs, invest in a lot of mobile programs that are taking groceries and going out into underserved areas and communities and meeting folks right where they are. And so we've worked with Renaissance West Community Initiative to set up a fresh produce market. So our associates come in and set out fresh produce from the same local and regional farmers that provide produce to our stores for customers that can go in and make purchases. And it's a really a good model that has seemed to work well for their families and for their seniors. And then we've also partnered as a resource to the community with the Bulb, which is an organization in Charlotte that is working to provide a means for communities to purchase local fresh food at affordable prices, which is completely in alignment with what we're trying to do at Food Lion in our stores every day, make food fresh, accessible, and affordable. But for those that can't purchase, we've partnered with them to set up transit center mobile markets down at Charlotte's Transit Center transportation hub, where we are serving hundreds of people that come through in a day and serving them with thousands of pounds of produce. And it's really, really an impactful opportunity because it eliminates both barriers of lack of access and lack of transportation. Again, being able to be on site, be there, and meet people where they are.
Thank you. We're going to go very shortly back to Afeni for the results of the survey that some of our people have, some of our viewers have taken. But before we go back, I want to touch on something very quickly that I touched on in the introduction, that even as we're talking about this, and we had no way of knowing, it would be great to have someone from County Commission on tonight or this evening, but we had no way of knowing that this was going to happen. Commissioner Fuller has proposed $3 million in additional county money to address the very problem that we're talking about tonight. It was approved in a straw vote. It has yet to make it into the final budget, but among other things, it would increase equitable access to food and eliminating food deserts in the Crescent. This appropriation would support land acquisition, leasing, subsidy, incentives, goods, services, and supporting the effort to mitigate food insecurity. This would be a one-time allocation, but a substantial increase over what I believe was the $600,000 that initially was placed or proposed in the budget. It would increase that 600,000 to 3 million. So just a real example of why it's important to be involved in local government. It's important to know what our elected officials are doing, and it's important to reach out to them and let them know what issues are important to us and the communities we care about. So with that, we're going to go to Athene now for the survey results. Athene?
Yes, thank you, Glenn. So we're going to switch gears for a moment and discuss the results of the audience survey. Please keep in mind that these results are only based on our audience members who completed the survey. So our first question was, how aware would you say you were of food deserts and their implications prior to this conversation? So as you see here, we have about 10% of surveyors who said that they were completely unaware of food deserts and their impact, about 24% who were partially aware, 19% who were somewhat aware, and we do have a majority of our surveyors of about 48% who selected that they were fully aware of food deserts and their implications prior to tonight's conversation. Our second question was, including yourself, how many households are you aware of that currently live in food deserts? As you can see, we have about 19% of surveyors who currently know of no households living in food deserts, about 43%, which is our majority, who know 1 to 5 households. And we even have 14% who know 6 to 10 households, and about 24% who know of more than 10 households. So between the 14 and 24%, we have almost a majority of people who know more than 6 households that are currently living in food deserts. Our third question was, what food desert related struggles has the pandemic escalated the most? So here we have about 29% of surveyors who selected that it was the loss or diminished income, about 10% who selected that it is issues with transportation access. We have a small percentage who selected that it's lack of access to sanitary supplies. And a majority here of about 48% selected that it's the increased vulnerability from compromised health. And of course, we gave our audience members an opportunity to give their own input about this answer. And we have selections such as that there's a lack of access to healthy food options and food in general. And we also have a surveyor who said that food deserts, the term food deserts, are what outsiders use to demean the poor. And the correct term is actually food sovereignty or food apartheid. And our final question is, what do you think would combat the problem of food deserts most effectively? So we have here 55%, a majority of our surveyors who selected that we need more grocery stores in underserved locations. We have an equal 15% who selected that we need more community gardens, and we have another 15 who selected that we need cheaper, healthy food options. We have some surveyors who gave their own individual responses, and they said things such as fixing a history of biases in investments, jobs, and healthcare, and this requires a systems response, and getting the city to acknowledge and include all people at the planning table and not just the white and affluent. So based on these survey results, Glenn, was there something that stood out to you or to the panelists?
There were a number of things that jumped out at me. One in particular, I was actually surprised how few people were familiar with the term food desert. Some were completely unfamiliar with it, and then others were somewhat unfamiliar with it. If you put those together, I believe close to half the people who took the survey were not fully aware that in parts of our community, people don't have access to grocery stores, and therefore fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, fresh meats. That was the thing that stood out to me the most. But let's hear from the panel. Let's start with Let's start with Tom. Tom, anything in particular jumped out at you in that survey?
The issue of getting grocery stores into neighborhoods is a annoyingly persistent one. And I know, for instance, Ricky Hall, who grew up on West Boulevard, is now the president, I believe, of the West Boulevard Coalition, has been working that issue literally his whole life. He's about my age, and West Boulevard still doesn't have a grocery store. It's something that on one hand seems frighteningly obvious, but on the other hand, it is intractable.
Okay, Debbie?
Yeah, so I'd like to comment on growing up in the Brook Hill community. If you've ever heard the saying, you don't know you're in it until you're out of it and you can look back. So growing up in the community, we did not know that we were in a food desert, because it became the norm to walk down to the corner store. Whenever you got an opportunity to jump in the car and go to a grocery store, that was a big event. But I'm not surprised at the numbers that there are folks that don't know about it, because hey, it was a norm for them growing up. If you lived in the West Boulevard corridor, Beatties Ford Road, where there's no grocery stores, we didn't know that we were in a food desert at that time growing up. But when you get out of that community, you get out of that box, and I moved away now 20 years. I stay over off of Sugar Creek, and now I can look back and say, wow, we never had a real grocery store in our community. But when you're in it, you don't see that. It's a normal way of life to walk down to the corner store. So I would just like to throw that out there, because there may be people actually living in this community that doesn't realize that they're living in a food desert, because it has become the norm. It's sad, but it's reality.
Raechelle?
I think I would like to just kind of comment and give some feedback. One thing that stuck out to me, obviously, was, a lot of the feedback around the fact that, more grocery stores would help in this area. And, one thing to say to that is, while Food Lion isn't able to be in every community, we are proud that we are oftentimes the only grocery store in many underserved areas, in many rural areas, right here in our community and across our footprint. And so we're proud to be there, and we're proud to serve and offer those fresh, affordable options to our neighbors in those communities. And the communities where we aren't able to be right now, we're proud to come alongside the organizations that we are able to invest in and partner with, so that we can ensure in some way, while it may not be a long-term solution, but it is in the short term, a solution to, we're investing in their work to bring in fresh produce and meats and vegetables and fresh food to those communities, so that they can thrive and nourish their families, as we all do. And I also think it's a point, I think we brought up earlier in the conversation about grocery wars here in Charlotte, and it's a thing. And I think that leads to a lot of people in our community not really understanding food deserts or underserved areas, because you hear so much in the media about the presence of grocery stores here in our area and the saturation of it. But the fact is, there are still many communities that, exist, not like myself, where I can walk out the door and reach 3 or 4 different grocery stores. So, that's why this conversation is so important, because so many are not aware, just based on that one fact alone.
Reggie, what about you? What jumped out at you?
Well, historian Dr. John Henry Clark reminded us that all history are current events. And I see that in 1980, 75% of the land of Mecklenburg County was owned by 1.7% of the people. And so unless there are arable land, and we know that millions of acres of land was doled out to people other than just being white peasants and being able to get citizenship coming from Europe, where they received millions of acres of land through the Homestead Act, the Morrill Act. And so in addition to the redlining, there were other very pernicious policies and laws that took effect. And those are the kinds of laws and policy to ensure that people get arable property, arable land, where they can be full participants. I'll also add was that the fact that the term food desert in itself is highly offensive to many, particularly those who believe that these areas have been divested and have been exploited, and they feel that they're mere victims of the system. And so it's as if they are blaming the victim. And so, and while there is life in deserts, you can grow food in the desert, many believe that this is a highly charged term. And so that's why I mentioned earlier, sovereignty is a much better word, because what you're doing is, and it is not so much predicated on just the grocery stores. And while 95% or so people get their food through grocery stores, what this COVID has revealed is that, and if you go to some of the seed companies, like the Beatties Ford Road hardware store, you'll see that some of their seeds are in very short supply. So there's great interest right now in people wanting to grow food, and just like during World War I, World War II, people were growing much more food themselves. So,
Reggie, can I interrupt you there for a second?
Sir?
Because that's a great segue into the next portion of our program, where we're going to take some questions from our audience. And one of the questions is about community gardens. You talked about the fact that if you go to certain hardware stores, seeds are in short supply. Are community gardens making a dent in this problem? We see them all over, but that's not large scale industrial farming. Are they making an impact?
Certainly. There's about 18 community gardens that the county has sponsored, and there are others that people are privately growing. In fact, I Am We is an organization that has been growing and building raised beds. They've built 45 raised beds since COVID. And so growing in containers, using a variety of ways to grow and produce is important. And certainly grocery stores are important, and some people get their food from corner stores and bodegas, unfortunately. But we know that with the increase of community gardens, orchards, CSAs, farmers markets, being involved with the full food system in terms of on the food chain with the ranchers, and we know that that is the role in which we need to go, and not just because just growing in containers is not going to get us out of this. We have to, in a very sovereign way, include those who have been marginalized and have been excluded from the food system so that they can profit from it. They can generate the revenue from it and not just be mere consumers. But certainly community gardens is, and container gardening is a way in which we could address some very short term, but we're talking about more regenerative, sustainable practices that's gonna mitigate future viruses and other economic downfalls in the future.
This is the growing season. Fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, they're abundant now. Raechelle, one viewer wants to know if Food Lion's feeding programs or feeding or food assistance programs, if they last year round, or are they just seasonal during this time of year when fresh fruits and vegetables are so abundant?
So Food Lion Feeds exists year round. Each and every single day, our stores and our associates are working to help solve hunger in our communities. And one way in which we do that is through our food rescue program that we operate in our stores. And many people don't know, but Food Lion was one of the very first retailers to pioneer this program. It's very common now. But we were one of the first retailers to work with Feeding America to establish this program where every single one of our stores, over 1,000+ stores across our footprint, are matched up with a local feeding agency or food pantry in their community, where they can pick up food from our stores and take it back to the pantries in their community and help meet needs there. So we do that every single day, in and out of season. We also donate fresh produce and meat and food directly from our warehouses, that customers will walk in our store and purchase that same food. We donate that food year round to our different food bank partners and feeding agencies as well, that we are so very privileged to partner with year round.
You actually touched in passing on what was going to be my next question. Another viewer wanted to know if that food distribution, those programs also included protein, and I'm guessing by protein this person means meats.
Oh, absolutely. So a well-rounded distribution for us, in partnership with our food banks, what that looks like is obviously having a plethora and a good variety of fresh fruits and vegetables first and foremost. And then from there, we like to have good sources of healthy proteins, as well as dairy products. So, you know, a lot of what we're donating, it's fresh. It's what I would sit at my kitchen table here and eat. It isn't necessarily the produce. I'm sorry, you know, the processed foods that a lot of people think of when they think of food banks. We've really ramped up over the years our donations of fresh food, because we want people to have access to the same food that you and I can walk in a food line and purchase today.
Tom, one viewer wants you to give the definition of a food desert one more time.
Well, it's from the USDA.gov website, and it is a low-income census tract in which 500 people, and there's some wiggles around this, but if you go to USDA.gov, you'll get to the definition real quick. But at least 500 folks, or a third of the population, have to walk more than about 15 minutes to a grocery store. Somebody has followed up on that idea with me, said if one is carless, the regional farmers market out on York Road or the new Uptown Farmers Market is like going to the moon. Maybe CATS could be engaged to provide free transportation just on Saturdays to get people back and forth to fresh seasonal produce. I like that idea.
Debbie, what do you think of that idea? Would that help Brook Hill residents or residents in other communities like Brook Hill?
Yes, it definitely would, for sure. We've also thought about, we got an invitation or a flyer for the Atherton Mill. They have a farmers market on Saturdays on South Boulevard in Tremont. And we talked about maybe getting a van or something and actually, you know, providing transportation to get there. And if I could ask Raechelle a quick question. When you go out to do your community work, do you guys accept the EBT card when they're out and on the mobile, your mobile event thing? Do you guys accept programs? Yes, yes. Do you accept EBT card?
We do not. We're not set up to do that. So a lot of these distributions are done in partnership with other programs. So, but to speak to that, so most of our distributions, all of our distributions, the food is given away free of charge. However, recently with the distributions that we've done with the Bulb here in Charlotte, the Bulb operates under a donation system. So if people want to, and they have the means to donate something to purchase their food, whatever that may be, there's no set price, then they're able to do that. And we support that. And we love that, because it's a dignified way for people to come out in the community and get what they need. You know, and not shy away from it because they feel as though they may be taking a handout, so to speak. So we certainly appreciate the work the Bulb is doing in that way, and allowing Food Lion to come alongside them and support those type of distributions. But no, to specifically answer your question, we are not set up as right now to accept EBT at our distributions.
You guys are touching on a lot of the questions that I wanted to ask. One of the things that I've learned to love about Charlotte is the generosity of its people. There are many, many people in Charlotte who are willing to open their hearts and their wallets to do the right thing. What can someone watching this program tonight who wants to address food insecurity in our community, what can they do? Now, we know that often food banks are looking for non-perishable goods, which means things that are canned. And while that is good food, it's not fresh food. It's often food that might be processed. It's food that might be high in sodium content. What can ordinary people do to help alleviate food insecurity in our community? Anyone want to tackle that question?
Yes.
I could just make a quick comment. Oh,
very quickly.
So we get a ton of donations from volunteers and a lot of our partnerships that we have with different organizations and just people, just friends, period. So we are blessed in that way, but again, it's non-perishable items. So if you want to donate something, we need fresh produce. Fresh.
If I could, I would just again add that charity is just not a sustainable model. To the degree we can get these food banks or other sources, where people get food from, to buy directly and to partner and engage directly with the Black farmers themselves. Because again, it's not enough to merely feed the people. We ultimately want Black people to be self-determining, self-controlling, where they're growing and profiting off of their own food. That is sustainable. Not only does it address the myriad of chronic diseases, but again, the employability that's still quite high in our community. So we have to be very intentional about that. When we look at the Charlotte 50th city study, unless we address, those fundamental issues, we're going to continue to be here again when the next pandemic come this way. So we have to be very intentional about moving and investing into those Black farmers, those Black producers, and tackle it head on.
Reggie, you've attempted to do that at the Rosa Parks Farmers Market involving Black farmers from the region and elsewhere. There are any number of people, really good people, working hard to make that farmers market a success.
Yes, sir.
But if you go there, you don't see the variety of foods fresh fruits and vegetables and produce that you might see at some other farmers markets. What are the challenges there? Why is that?
Well, that's why even if you provide food without education and without people understanding and having a sense of collective work and responsibility, they would drive past that and go to another place, as opposed to saying, we see those farmers who are investing their hard-earned monies and their times to build this community garden right here. In fact, by the leadership of Sister Vivian Stewart, we've intentionally set up in that corridor. This is the corridor where, and they have great strengths there too, but there are great significant challenges there. And so it's important that particularly the huge churches that exist in those communities, that particularly those who value Black people being self-determining, that they invest in those initiatives like the Rosa Parks Farmers Market. This is our 6th year coming up, and we're very proud of the work that's being done there. We hope that people that have the means will drive across town intentionally to make sure that they can support those farmers, because to the degree we're able to support the farmers and the producers, then it has to make a difference in terms of them coming back. So to the degree we're able to support the Rosa Parks Farmers Market and the farmers and the CSAs and these Mills Place initiatives, we'll see a people who will be empowered and again, not be disempowered and again, relying so heavily on the healthcare system now and the charitable benevolence of some of these nonprofits.
Very, very quickly, Reggie, just in a few words. It's
Rosa
the,
Parks.
yeah, I'm sorry?
I just wanted to say that the Rosa Parks Farmers Market is very unique from the other markets, very unique, because it's not so much just the transactions that happen, but it's transformative relationships, and we're gradually building a movement here. And with Ms. Vivian again, and with the leadership of the Advisory Council and the support of the Health Department and other community organizations, we're continuing to build a lasting, sustainable means of improving the conditions of these communities.
Has, very quickly, has the stay-at-home order and COVID-19 affected the market this season?
We're going to open June 16th. In fact, this is going to be a rapid response to what is happening with COVID. So we're speeding things up because we know people are in need. And
and for those who might be unaware, where is the market and what are the hours and dates?
It's going to be at 2020 Beatties Ford Road. And of course, we will be practicing those regulations and those mitigations, masking, gloves, social distancing. So one of the great things about that market was people would hang around and have relationships and great conversations, but we're going to encourage people to get their produce and kind of move on because of.
And what day and hours? What are the days and hours?
It's going to be Tuesdays from 3 o'clock to 7 o'clock, Tuesdays starting June 16th to the last Tuesday in September.
Okay, I see that by my computer clock, we've been at this for an hour. I want to be respectful of all of your time, but I do want to give each of you an opportunity to just have some very brief closing remarks. We're going to start with you, Tom.
Oh, you always start with me, and I have to come up with something. And actually, I wanted to, again, call out Reggie Singleton's work. There's a donate button someplace there, y'all. The Bulb, that's B-U-L-B. They have a website. They have a donate button. Ricky Hall and them out on West Boulevard next to the West Boulevard Public Library. The Seeds of Change Community Garden. Look up Seeds of Change, and also a group in Charlotte called 100 Gardens that are working to do aquaponics, farming fish, lettuce, things like that with our schools. So 100 Gardens. Part of what you can do is become aware. And I really appreciate the Gantt Center. I really appreciate Q City Metro in boosting my awareness tonight.
Debbie.
Oh, yes, I appreciate Harvey Gantt doing this. It's been wonderful. It has been enlightening to me because I had never met Mr. Reggie. Raechelle, I commend you in Food Line because you're absolutely correct. Food Line is always around and have been. But I would love to continue the conversation with you and Reggie.
Yes.
I will be at the Rosa Park Farmers Market when you open.
Raechelle.
Outstanding. Thank you.
Yes,
Raechelle?
to Ms. Debbie, I definitely see that there is opportunity there to where Food Lion can partner with you and support your community. So we would definitely continue those conversations. I think I would just like to also say thank you to everyone that's assembled here tonight. You know, I think what we've demonstrated here is that while we all have varying opinions and passions around hunger relief and food insecurity, I think we've demonstrated that we all have a seat at the table in this conversation, and that it's going to take varying voices and strategies to really address what we need to uplift our communities and make sure that they're nourished and set up for success. So just thank you to everyone, and thank you for the conversation tonight.
Thank you. And finally, Reggie.
Okay, thank you, brother. And again, I just want to let everybody know that there is good work being done in the community here. Great friends like Sister Nadine Ford and Jatanya Adams and Bernard Singleton, and again, the Czar family, Brother Brewington. Incredible work being done, but it's important that the resources be provided directly to them, and we move away from the just the charitable plantation model that exists here. And so people want to do for themselves. People want to grow. They're interested, and again, there's great interest. Again, people want to know more and do more for themselves and for the community, and it's important that we empower them to do so.
Thank you,
And
Reggie.
again, thank you so much for the Gantt Center for including me on this distinguished panel.
Thank you so much. And once again, thank you to the Harvey B. Gantt Center. Thank you to our panelists, and thank you for those of you who have watched online. I don't know which, I think this is maybe my 5th time moderating Unmasked, and each time has absolutely been a pleasure. My hats off to the Gantt Center for its continued good work in the community. The Gantt Center is a cultural gem in our community. It's an organization with heart. Its heart's in the right place. And now we're going to go back to Afeni, who's going to tell you how what you can now do to help ensure the continuation of the Harvey B. Gantt Center and the continuation of programs like this, which truly benefit our communities. Afeni?
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you so much for mentioning the importance of this type of work. The Gantt Center is proud to be a platform for conversations about issues such as food deserts and their impact. And without your support, these programs would not happen. To assist in keeping these programs alive, consider supporting our Text to Give platform. By texting 345-345, you can conveniently support the Gantt Center and the furthering of our mission. We thank you in advance for your support, for your contributions to the Gantt Center, and of course, for your contributions to tonight's conversation. As always, please be safe and take care. Good night.